You might already know how one small shift in thinking can lead to extraordinary change. Imagine receiving insights that can inspire your next big breakthrough. That's exactly what you get when you subscribe to Paper Napkin Wisdom's newsletter. Go to papernapkinwisdom.com and join us today.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode number 221. Have you ever wondered why resistance keeps on showing up just when you're on the verge of something big? Maybe you felt it when launching a new project or stepping outside your comfort zone, or even making a tough decision. What if that resistance wasn't a roadblock, but a sign that you're on the right path? Today, we're diving into this powerful idea with Lolly Spindler. She's a content marketing strategist, entrepreneur, and expert in crafting messages that truly connect. Now, you might already know that words have power, but what if the way we respond to resistance could completely shift our perspective on growth? Lolly shares simple and profound insights, and here's what's fascinating. When she wrote them down, she emphasized specific letters to drive more meaning. Imagine how your life could change if you stopped seeing resistance as something to avoid and instead saw it as a guide. In this conversation, Lolly unpacks how storytelling, reframing fear, and embracing discomfort can help us build deeper connections and unlock new levels of success. As you listen, you might find yourself thinking about a moment in your life where resistance showed up. What did it mean for you? What did you learn? As you reflect, I invite you to write down your biggest insight and share it with us using the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom. Now, let's dive in. Let's go. Lolly Spindler, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm happy to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled, and we talked about this before starting. A little envious of the warmth. You're in Mexico. I'm in Canada. It's very cold today, and it looks very warm where you're at.
Yeah,
so
it's beautiful. That's one reason I decided to live here, because the weather's great year round.
Exactly. So you shared an interesting paper napkin, and I know you are careful about words, so I imagine that it was well crafted and highlighted. It's interesting. So you say resistance shows you where to grow, but it looks like you've gone over the letters. So grow spelled Grow, but you've gone over the letters G and O repeatedly. So they're highlighted or stronger. So
Yes.
you see the word go. Why did you share that with me?
So I think when we look back on our lives, hindsight is 2020, right? And it's only when we look back that we see, even though that part of my life was hard or that was an unforeseen circumstance, it ultimately brought me to where I am today. So once we start seeing those patterns in our lives, it kind of becomes obvious that when we feel that resistance to something, it's really showing us where the growth is. And that is where we need to go in order to experience that growth and therefore, basically like evolve into the next person we're supposed to be. So that's why I went over the G and the O, because it really is like the path. Like somebody said, the obstacle is the way. It's basically a different way of saying that, because that's where it's going to push you out of your comfort zone and into your growth zone is when you're feeling that resistance.
So I love the use of the word is it resistance, and I know you're a writer, an artist in one respect, and there's a great book called War of Art, and he talks about resistance, right? How resistance gets stronger even the closer you get to something. So you're smiling, you've read the book,
yeah,
or you're familiar with it. So that's what you're talking about, right? Like it's the resistance that pushes you to where you are, but you need to push through that, right?
Exactly. Top of mind example for me is I just started my second business this past year. And I've always been like a writer, editor, marketer. And so my work has always spoken for itself. I always got, referrals, word of mouth. That's how I got my clients. And so I never really had to market myself because my work kind of did it for me. And when I started coaching other freelance writers how to create their own businesses and grow them, I realized, oh, I'm the product now. Like, obviously, I have a course and a program, but I'm really having to market myself. And that felt really uncomfortable at first because, like, especially as a writer, it's more insular, right? Like, you're more just behind your screen, writing for your clients. And all of a sudden I was like, oh no, I have to like push myself out there and start connecting and talking with people because I want to get this message out. And that I felt a lot of resistance. I was like so out of my comfort zone. And I was just like, okay, this means I'm supposed to be doing this. Like, this is the way I have to go if I want to grow into like my next evolution. This is exactly what I have to be doing because it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
you,
that's
you even
exactly.
sound uncomfortable talking about it, right? Like, this is not where you didn't start becoming a writer because you wanted to speak to 1,000 strangers a week, right? Like, that's not why you did this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even like starting my first business, which is writing and editing and creating content for other small businesses, it wasn't even intentional. It just kind of like happened. I was working a full-time job in an office and I hated it. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing this for the rest of my life. Like, there has to be another way. And then I realized like that job, I was writing about real estate and I had taken the job and knew nothing about real estate. And all of a sudden was bringing all of this traffic to this real estate website. And I was like, wait a second, if I can do this for one industry, I can do this for any industry. You know, I just have to employ my really good like researching skills and I can learn. And that's when I was like, okay, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm quitting this job and I'm starting my own business and gonna like find a couple clients and then we'll see what happens. And 10 years later, I'm still doing that. And it's grown to six figures and I've maintained that for the past 3 years. So it worked. But even in that, like I just kind of like jumped in headfirst and was like, all right, let's figure it out.
Right. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Jobs wrote or gave a Stanford commencement address, and it's famous because what he talks about is this idea that you can't figure out your life looking forward. It only makes sense looking backward. And you're sort of saying that. And he talks about picking up these dots. You pick up
Mhm.
things as you go because you don't know when you're going to need them, but you need them because you know you need them because you're interested in them,
Yeah.
not distracted by them, interested in them. It's important to know the difference, but pick them up, have them because you never know when you're going to use them. And he talked about a calligraphy course that he took when he was in college, turning into his knowledge of fonts. Is that kind of what you're talking about here too? That you take the things that you are learning. Hey, I figured out real estate. I can go and use this elsewhere. The
Mhm.
dot wasn't real estate. The dot was research, right? So
Yeah.
part of that is also maybe being honest with yourself about what you're learning. Is that something you're deliberate about?
Yes, definitely. And it's basically like seeing the skills that you have honed with each step, right? So for that real estate job, like, yes, I had a couple more clients in real estate and I got to write more in real estate, but it was more like, oh, now I've learned SEO. Now I've learned how to write for the web and formatting for the web and making sure readers on the web will continue reading something based on the formatting I use. Like all these little things I learned at that first job, I still apply to this day. So yeah, it was basically just taking every skill set that you have and that you pick up along the way and then continuing it to apply it. And that has been crucial to my business ever since.
That's amazing. So tell me about that. So the resistance that you felt leaving the job, it sounds like you didn't feel a lot of resistance there, or did you?
It was more, it was resistance to like staying. It was resistance to like, well, it was both, right? So it was resistance to like, I can't stay here. I need to get out. And then it was like also resistance to, but I have no idea what I'm doing. So I was just kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place. And was like, I know this isn't it, but I don't know how to do this.
Uh,
So
right.
between those two paths, I chose I'm going to figure it out, the one that I don't know how to do, because that still seems better than staying in the status quo and staying in this 9 to 5, because that is going to kill my soul. So I just figured the other way to go is like, this seems like the less soul crushing path for me to take.
So it showed you where to grow, right? Showed you where to
Mhm.
go, showed you where to grow. But what did you do to take those first steps? Did you just, jump in? Did you how did you light your path?
Yeah. So thankfully, like I said, I had gotten that skill set from being on the job for that first year and learned a lot about inbound marketing and writing for the web and SEO and basically tailoring my writing to an online audience. And so I already had the skills. I already thankfully had a lot to put in my portfolio as well because I had all these written pieces of content from that year for that website. So the first thing I did was create a website. I had a portfolio. And then I was like, okay, now I need to go actively look for clients. And actually, some of my first clients that some of whom I still work with today were all from a co-working space that I joined right after I left that job. So I knew I didn't want to be home 24/7. But I loved working remotely, but I am also a huge proponent. Like I love community and building community and being in community. So I found a local co-working space. This is when I was still living in Long Beach, California, called We Labs. And that's where I found my first few clients, which was so great because, just like talking about like what we do while we're in the co-working space, making friends, a little happy hour. And that's where I started connecting with people and realized everybody needs content these days. Like everybody needs written content. Even with AI, like you still need a human to read it and edit it. And so back then, obviously, AI still wasn't a thing. So I realized, oh, like actually my skills are really needed. And that was kind of a great starting point was that co-working space to start like dipping my toe in and having, these connections one-on-one that ended up lasting for years later.
That's amazing. So what I find it is you said that you were a reluctant marketer, like that it was hard for you to market yourself, but it sounds like that's what you did kind of
Yeah.
naturally, but you sold yourself on it around community, right? Like I even
Yeah.
saw you do it now. Is that how you did it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm a marketer, but I normally am marketing somebody else's products or services. And so for me, like, getting clients after those first few, the majority were referrals and word of mouth. So that's why I didn't have to like really push my services out that hard or like go out looking for, I need to sign X amount of clients this month. They just kind of kept coming to me. Because like I said, my work spoke for myself. So it was funny, like when I'm transitioned into doing my second business as well, all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I'm marketing me and not just somebody else's products or services. So that's when I felt like, oh, okay, like I have the skills, I know how to do it. Now I just have to get like more comfortable doing it for myself instead of for someone else.
Yeah. So look, I think somewhere out there, somebody's listening, and maybe they're still in a job, maybe they're not, maybe they're running their business and they've got a few employees and they're grinding, and they're saying, "Well, okay, look, it sounds like Lolly took her portfolio, got a couple clients real quickly, and it's just been sort of smooth sailing. Where's the resistance? It's harder for me. They're selling themselves and saying it's harder for me. I don't think you're saying it was easy.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Um, I actually 6 months in, I had a couple clients, but I still wasn't making the money I wanted to. So I actually was brought on full time by an inbound marketing agency that was remote in Texas. And I was their content marketing manager remotely from California for a couple years, in addition to my freelance clients. And that was going well. We were like, there was literally just the founders and me. So there were three of us. And that was going really well. And I left on a year-long work travel program called Remote Year. And basically, Remote Year is for remote workers, and you live in a different country for a month for a whole year. So we basically were going to be in Southeast Asia for 3 months, Europe for 3 months, and then Central and South America for 6 months. And so I'd been working remotely, but I had never been traveling while working remotely. So I pitched it to my boss and I was like, hey, like you've seen I can do this for the past year and a half or whatever it was at the time. So now I want to try and like work while I'm like traveling and let's see what happens. And he was like, go for it. So 2 months into that program, I was in Cambodia and I got a phone call and he was like, we're going under. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And there was like no 2 weeks notice, nothing. They had run out of money and I didn't have a salary starting that day. And this was 2 months into my
And
year-long
you're
program.
in. Cambodia.
And I was in Cambodia. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I was like, okay, well, thank God I've already started my freelance writing business and already have a couple clients and already have like a home for my business on with my website and my portfolio. So now, thankfully, I can, talk to my clients, be like, hey, I am open to taking on more work now. And I could then actively look for new clients because, I had kind of not needed to look for new clients just because I had a full-time job for those 6 months, after those 6 months of being freelance. And so I was like, thank God I started this before I took this job because now it's been my saving grace. And it was in that moment that I felt that resistance, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to pack up all my things and go home now when I was like so excited to travel the world for a year? Or am I going to pivot and like really start buckling down on my freelance business finally, like not look for a full-time job, leverage the clients I have, start looking for new business, and like, is this what I'm committing to now? So that's exactly what I did. Was like, after that, I was like, this is a sign. I'm supposed to commit to this thing full time. I don't know what I'm doing. I have like a couple clients. I have 10 months ahead of me in different countries around the world, but I'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And so thankfully, someone in my program actually was working for another startup who needed content. So I like got him as a client, and then he helped me get another client, and he floated me through the rest of the year. And then after that year of like traveling, I was like, okay, now I'm like, have a home. I can like sit down and like root. And now I can put like more focus and energy into my business. So that's kind of how that happened, was by like, all right, like, here we go. Let's see if I can make this work because I really want to see the world.
It, there's a really neat idea that I like to talk about, is that you need to build a well before you need it. And
Mm,
it sounds like you had accidentally, on purpose, built this well that you were
mhm,
able to go back to. But it also sounds like um, you didn't hesitate to lean back into community, which is
mm,
something that you appreciate, when you went back to this group, right? That in your program there were other people, so you just put a flare up and said, "Hey, this happened. I'm
mhm.
in Cambodia looking for clients, FYI," right? Like you
Exactly.
is that something you've always done, or is that something you learned to do? And do you do it intentionally? Like, is that part of, is there an intentionality around leaning into your community, into your network today?
Yes, 100%. Because that's like my number one value is community. And so I really think we need to leverage our communities to help us individually and collectively. So actually, one of the first things I teach my students is, you want new clients? Do they know that you're doing this? Like, does anybody in your network know that you're doing this now? Like, tell them. Like, your first client is probably going to be someone that you know, because either they need content or somebody in their network needs content. So lean on your network and throw up a flare, right? Send out an email being like, I decided to start freelance writing. I would love if you would want to work with me. Let's talk about it. And just like send it out to, old colleagues, friends, family. And then not only will you most likely get work, most people do, but then also you get so much support. And that's exactly what you need when you're starting, is like, it can be really scary. And you're like, I'm doing this new thing. And all of a sudden you have this network around you being like, oh my God, that's so incredible. Like, I'm so happy for you. Good luck. And I will keep you in mind if anything ever comes up that I need for content. So it's kind of like gives you the double, right? Like, yes, it can be revenue generating in the sense that it can get you clients, but it can also be just like that support you need when you're starting any new endeavor.
But okay, counterpoint though,
Hmm.
you're not the kind of person who just goes out into your community when you need something, are you?
No, I also give a lot.
Yeah, right. And I think that's the part that you're not sharing, is that the community was there because you're serving it first, right?
Yes.
So talk about that for you. Like, what does that look like when you don't need something? How are you leaning into community?
Yeah. So I love to create spaces for people to gather, whether it's physically or virtually. Like, for example, I created a LinkedIn group. Oh my God, like 8, 9 years ago now. And I think there's over 3,000 people. And it was just a space for copywriters, social media people, and editors to kind of come together. And this was like, so long ago, there was so many different iterations of like Google and SEO and all these different things. And a lot of times they would need each other, right? Like a social media manager would need content, or like a writer would need an editor. And so kind of like just existed at this place to not only share like, this is a new tactic or marketing tactic I learned that might help you, but also like, I need help with this project. Can someone, send me a recommendation? Or, so it just became like this virtual gathering place of like these creatives where they could share work, but also just like learn from one another, which has been really cool. Because even today, people will share their blog posts that they've just written about AI or whatever. And so we're constantly like learning from one another. And then in person, I love to create spaces for people to gather as well. I have a lot of female entrepreneur friends, and I'm lucky enough that a lot of them are here with me in Mexico City. And so I love to create spaces where we can come together and just learn from one another and share. Because I think that's really important. And that's the way that you not only grow like as a business, but as an individual. So yeah, I would say like community building is definitely something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, and I think that you're very humble, modest, shy, even to talk about the fact that you built this community um, of people who are going to learn together, right? And I have this belief fundamentally that we are our best. We create the most scale when we are for the world what we need for ourselves. And you needed tips on SEO. You needed to have these resources because you didn't know it. You were being thrust into this situation in real estate. And instead of saying, oh, I can't figure this out, you said, hey, who else wants to learn this thing? Let's learn together. And that's just something that you've been deliberate about ever since, right?
Yeah.
And and so uh, how do you just talk about how somebody listening can do that? Where would they start for this? Like, what would you suggest somebody to do if they're trying to learn something new, um, leaning into community like that? What would you suggest to them?
Yeah. So I give a lot of tools in my course, but one thing I definitely tell my fellow writers is there's so many resources on like Facebook and LinkedIn. And there's so many groups. Like there's like the Binders Full of Women Writers is a great one that I love. That's very like tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's lots of LinkedIn ones. Like there's my LinkedIn group, but there's also lots of ones for editors. And also there's tons of Slack communities that are really great too, where you can learn from other writers or creatives, whatever your industry is. And I can send you this website after, so you can like put it in the show notes. But there's actually a website where you can go in and put whatever industry you're interested in, and it'll give all the public Slack groups. So then you can go in and join the Slack groups, which is also
Oh,
a great resource. So depending on your industry, I definitely recommend that you join those because there's tons of resources in there and you can connect with people who are interested in the same thing as you.
yeah. So whatever business industry or whatever you're in, the beauty of the internet is there's a community out there for you. You just
Yeah,
have to find it, join in, jump
exactly.
in, and don't be shy about that because your journey has been about going to that place of resistance. But I think one of the things he's talked about is like that you get it for two reasons. You go into that community not just to get the technical knowledge that you might be missing, but more importantly, the encouragement. And that's been really valuable to you, right?
Exactly. And then it's like the resistance isn't as daunting because you're not doing it alone, right? You have like a team of people with you who are confronting the same thing. And another thing I've learned is like so many people are willing to help, like more than not. If you ask a question or ask for advice, people will jump in and help you if they can.
So one of the things I think is interesting about this, and I don't want to glaze over this, there probably was a moment when you were in Cambodia with a job gone, and you're thinking, I can't do this, right? There
Yeah.
probably was a moment of self doubt. There's a moment where you're saying, this is a sign, this is who I am. Like this situation is who I am, not what I thought I was. And how did you get through that? What was the thing that you did?
So first, like I had to be practical about like my finances for one, because it was this is like 2016, 2017. And the program was 2000 a month. And so I had to make sure I at least like practically financially could like make it through the year. So thankfully I had saved quite a bit, but also I looked at the clients I had and I was like, okay, how much more do I need to make from these existing clients, or do I need to bring in from new clients in order to like match my savings so I can keep doing this crazy thing for another 10 months? So thankfully, after planning through that, I was able to be like, okay, now I know exactly what I need to do in order to make this a reality for me, which is something I also recommend when people are starting a business, especially if they want to start as a side gig, because it's like, great, start it as a side gig. Once you have hit this threshold where you feel comfortable with like practically how much you're making, how much you need to live, then go into it full time. Like, you don't have to jump in like all the way right at the beginning. Like, it's okay to be practical about it. So that's exactly what I did when this happened in Cambodia. I was like, okay, like, how can I make this work? Let's work backwards. How much do I need? Okay, now how many new clients do I need? What can I pitch my existing clients to get me to that monthly goal? And then from there, thankfully, I also had reached out to people within my group who were traveling with me, and they helped me get some clients, which was amazing. And so using that like collective community, but also just being practical and knowing what my goals were and what I needed to survive and to like make it through the year. Those were the two things that kind of like helped me get through that point where I was just like stunned and like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I was like, baby steps, let's figure this out. What's the minimum I need? Okay, how can I get that? Reaching out to people I know. Okay. So those were like the first two things that like got me out of that like depression that I might have to go home.
One of the things I think you're really humble about this, but your instincts are really great. When you were in that crisis, you got real about your finances. You got real about the situation. You made sure you had all the facts about where you were. You aligned your resources. So as I call this process focus, align, act. You focused on where you were. You got real about the situation. You aligned all your resources around what you needed to accomplish, and you acted. You focused, aligned, and act. And I think that's so aligned with your message about resistance shows you where to grow, because it could show you the path, but you still needed to be realistic, realign, and go for it. And I think that those are really great instincts. And it's great that you're sharing that with so many people. I think that's wonderful. As you know, at the end of every podcast, we end with a shout out for somebody. Who would you like to shout out in the world?
I would like to shout out my friend Ashley Vaughn. She's a fellow female entrepreneur that's currently here in Mexico City with me. We've done lots of lives together. She's starting an app for other female entrepreneurs to like come together and connect. And so I love that she's also all about community and entrepreneurship and helping women-led businesses. So she's been really great, because it's just nice to talk to someone who's like going through similar things as you. She's like a really good support to me, and I just love her so much.
That's wonderful. Well, you have a lot to give, Lolly. I'm glad that you're doing it and you're out there living it. Congratulations. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Isn't it interesting how resistance often appears just before a breakthrough? You might already be thinking about a time when you faced resistance. And what if that challenge was actually guiding you towards your next level of growth? Today's conversation with Lolly revealed something powerful. Resistance isn't a stop sign, it's an invitation to move forward. And when you look back on your own journey, you might start to notice that the moments of greatest resistance were also moments that shaped you the most. Could it be that the very thing making you uncomfortable is the thing you needed to embrace? Imagine if instead of hesitating, you saw resistance as the push you needed to take action. Think about a time when you shared your real vulnerable moments and it created the strongest connection. What could be possible if fear wasn't a signal to stop, but a reminder, a beacon that you're on the right path? Consider the possibility that small, intentional steps are already moving you towards success. Now, as you think about what that means for you, take a moment to write down your biggest insight in a napkin. What resistance have you been facing? And what happens when you decided to go anyway? Share it with us using the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. And before you go, if this conversation sparked something in you, I wonder how different things would be if you subscribed, left a review, or shared this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep leaning into the moments that challenge you, because that's where the growth happens. And make it a great day.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
The way we work is changing every day, thanks in large part to the internet. So if you're an online creator, what can you do to create a sustainable future for yourself? On Attach Your Resume, creators share how their jobs work, especially during times like these where big changes are happening in the online world. Listen to interviews with internet reporter Taylor Lorenz, CEO of Patreon Jack Conte, representatives from Defector, Aftermath, and more. Whether you're an online creator yourself or curious about what's going on in the online Wild West, search Attach Your Resume wherever you listen to your podcasts.